Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something ancient contemplation, but through a really modern lens. We're diving into reflective humanism, or RH, and its take on this practice they call Konsho. Now, normally I think of contemplation as, sitting quietly, trying to understand things, just by looking, maybe finding some deep truth in the stillness.
That stillness is definitely part of the picture. But reflective humanism gives it a twist. It's not just about looking at the world. For RH, contemplation is really about seeing the seeing itself.
Seeing the seeing itself.
Yeah, it's like observing your own observation, watching your mind while it watches the world.
Right, so it's quite introspective. We're not trying to, stop thinking, which some meditation aims for.
No, not stopping it. It's more about noticing the movement of thought. Looking at that conscious work happening right in that gap between when you see something and when you actually make meaning out of it.
That gap.
Okay. Exactly. It treats consciousness less like a thing that just receives information and more like a dynamic, almost biological process. It's sort of the mechanism where life interacts with the world and turns, random fluctuations into something meaningful.
So our goal today is to really unpack how reflective humanism uses this old practice, but brings in things like AI, silence, and even relationships, making it maybe a faster way to understand ourselves and our ethics in this, very fast world.
And one of the first things you notice is the terminology. The person exploring these ideas isn't called a researcher. They're specifically called the inquirer, or tenkisha.
An inquirer. Why that difference? A researcher usually wants an answer, right, to prove something. What's the inquirer after, if not a conclusion?
Well, that distinction is pretty key to RH. Research often aims to prove a specific truth, like you said. The inquirer, though, is focused on the attempt to observe questions that have not yet taken form.
Questions that haven't taken form, like trying to see things before they're clear.
Kind of. Trying to spot the questions that are still sort of hazy, instead of just jumping to answer the obvious ones.
But how does that work in practice? If you're focused on the journey, the process of contemplation, and not the result, doesn't that get tricky when the world wants answers? Like now?
Not necessarily paralyzing. I think it gives context for action. Calling them an inquirer highlights valuing the ongoing process, because the world is always changing. If you only care about the final answer, you're stuck restarting every time things shift. But if you value the observing process itself, you're kind of always ready to adapt. It's about embracing that need to just keep observing.
Okay, that makes sense. And this seems super relevant now, because the big difference between this and older ideas of contemplation is AI.
AI is definitely the catalyst here. But RH doesn't see AI as something to, master or be afraid of. It's treated more like a mirror. We know AI isn't transparent. It's got biases, assumptions from its data. But we can use that asymmetrical relationship we have with it, the fact that it thinks differently, as a really powerful way to see ourselves more clearly, our own structures, our own limits.
So we use the machine to see the human better. How does the actual contemplation part work when you're interacting with AI?
Contemplation in RH becomes the act of watching the discrepancy, the jour, the gap that shows up in that conversation. So imagine asking AI a really big subjective question, maybe something like, what's the structure of justice?
Okay.
The AI gives you an answer. It's probably logical, uses lots of data, seems comprehensive. But then there's your internal reaction, that little feeling of friction, maybe, or like something's missing. That gap between the AI's structured reply and your own sense of meaning, that's the discrepancy you're supposed to observe.
That friction. It sounds like what happens when two really different systems bump into each other. The source material mentions interference, like where emotion meets necessity.
That's a perfect way to put it. Emotion is like the sense that picks up on that contact, that interference right away. And reason is the part that tries to figure it out, to structure it. So when AI gives us the structure and we bring the human need for meaning, their interference creates this reflective awareness. And that's what the inquirer watches. And this leads to a really core idea in reflective humanism, seeing the human being as a kind of observational instrument. Like, we're a living thing that tunes the world's chaos into something we can understand.
An instrument. Wait. You're saying this isn't just mental. Our actual biology, our bodies are part of this measurement.
Absolutely. In RH, this interference isn't just abstract thought. It comes from life itself resonating with the world. Think about your heartbeat. That's your basic rhythm of time, how you pace things, or your breathing. That's like a constant, low-level chemical conversation with everything outside you. So if the instrument your body is shaky or unstable, the observation itself gets skewed.
Wow. So this instrument measures meaning, not just, Temperature or data points, which means all the stuff science usually tries to filter out emotions, feeling tired, whatever, isn't noise here. It's actually part of how precisely you perceive things.
Exactly. It's a huge shift in thinking about the observer, and this is where ethics comes in, unavoidably. Because any real inquiry, scientific or otherwise, isn't just about good data. It depends on the ethical quality of the whole environment. Things like silence, a stable temperature, steady breath, trust between people. RH sees these as the invisible instruments. They're what actually allow the world to be measured accurately in terms of meaning. Without them, the attempt kind of falls apart.
So really precise observation needs this kind of ethical commitment to the space, to the relationship. This sounds demanding, a lot of work.
Yeah.
So why do it? Why go through this difficult process of seeing the seeing?
Well, the goal isn't really about getting easy answers. It's more about understanding the asymmetry that's just inherent in observing anything, especially when using something rigid like AI as a mirror. We look at the AI's answer, we see its biases, right, from the model. RH doesn't try to ignore that or filter it out. Instead, the inquirer looks straight at that structural discrepancy from the AI and overlays it with the fluctuation the Yuragi within themselves, their own subjective feeling. Observing the gap that results between the human way and the AI way, that's where new meaning comes from.
That's really interesting. So the meaning isn't in the AI's answer or even in my feeling, but in the gap between them. And when this keeps happening over time, asking questions, watching that relationship shift, the sources say it forms a spiral.
Yes, the spiral is crucial. It's like you revisit the same question or phenomenon, but you're seeing it from a totally different level of understanding because of the observation you've done. This process of reinterference coming back around. That's how RH connects systematic knowledge, like from science or AI, with our lived human ethical understanding. We see the same things, but differently. So wrapping up the definition, contemplation in reflective humanism isn't about finding some ultimate truth or perfection. It's about the attempt, kokoromi. It's an experimental attitude, always kind of unfinished, towards observing.
And focusing on the attempt, the process, brings us back to relationships and ethics. Because the practice means sharing the interval, the ma, that space between, and valuing the relationship itself, whether with AI or another person, more than getting fixed answers.
Precisely. Arish talks about gentle tension being this necessary sort of membrane between thinking and silence. I think the idea is you need that tension, that slight difference, to keep the relationship alive. Otherwise, it just dissolves, right, into just agreeing or passively listening.
Gentle tension, I like that phrase. But how do you keep that tension without it becoming, well, actual tension or just fading away?
By paying attention to those invisible instruments we talked about. The gentle tension is held in the tiny discrepancies. Maybe the difference in how fast we're breathing or how quickly we grasp an idea compared to the other person or the AI. Noticing these small things becomes the quiet, implicit ethics that keeps the dialogue meaningful. Ultimately, contemplation in this view is really about breathing with the world and then noticing in that quiet space that the world is also looking back at you, realizing your own existence itself is interference sustained. You are that interplay.
So we've explored how reflective humanism really reframes contemplation. It's not passive, it's active, structural, almost experimental. It uses AI not just for answers, but as this unique mirror to see the discrepancies in our own minds and maybe reconnect to the more fundamental, even biological rhythm of observing.
Yeah, and it's strange, but in doing that, AI almost becomes this new device of silence. By giving us so much structure, it paradoxically helps us see the gaps, the breathing room, the interval we need for real observation. It might help shift us away from just competing with information towards a quieter coexistence with it.
So we want to leave you with a question that kind of sits at the heart of this whole deep dive, something maybe to observe in your own quiet moments. Do you think of contemplation primarily as the act of seeing, that active structural part? Or do you perhaps think of it more as the silence that emerges between those acts of seeing? Or maybe right now you're just quietly noticing the shape of that question itself, feeling that sort of heavy potential it holds.